welcome to the June edition of HR Hot Topics. I'm your host, Jodi Schafer, and my aim is to make this the most informative 5 to 10 minutes per month. This month, we are going to take a detour and stop talking about legislative updates and policy changes. I know, hold your applause. It is exciting, though. It gets a bit dry after a while talking about all of that. Important, but let's move on, right? So this month we're going to talk about something else, something I spend a lot of time training on, and that is how to say hard things. Difficult conversations are something that very few individuals in the workplace are comfortable having. It takes a certain level of skill. It takes the ability to manage your own emotions and to keep your assumptions in check. Everybody can learn how to do it, however, and that's why we do training on this topic. But it's challenging. I was reading a Forbes article recently, and it said 70% of employees avoid difficult conversations and uncomfortable situations at work. We deal with it by avoiding them. We deal with it by telling somebody else who's not involved in the situation about the situation. Or we do passive-aggressive things to sort of get our point across to somebody that we're upset with them. And then they're supposed to read the tea leaves and figure out why and just intuit, right, how to make it better. This happens in your personal life too, folks, by the way. This isn't just relegated to work, but it is challenging. And so as leaders, this is something that many of you struggle with. And as a result, you are not role modeling for your team how they should be having these kinds of conversations with each other. Close your eyes for a moment. Wouldn't it be amazing if everyone on your team had the skill set and the confidence and the empathy to be able to have direct conversations with each other when something went sideways, instead of having to involve you in every one of those? I mean, like, can you imagine how much stuff you get done in a day, right? So this really does start at the top. So I thought, let's devote an episode to this and just, I'll give you a couple of the highlights here. I'm going to put some articles in the notes in the email like I always do. Some of these are articles that we wrote. I'm going to link to the Forbes article I just quoted about the 70%, and I'll share with you a few other tips and resources too. But I think in the beginning, what's important to understand is that these kinds of conversations go a lot better when you have a certain level of trust and respect with the individual that you're interacting with. Now, if this is someone that you have worked with for a long time, perhaps that rapport is in place. If this is a brand new employee, not so much, right? But it doesn't mean that you can sidestep the conversation. But I want to put that out there first because you have to put effort and energy into building relationships, because you're going to have to pull from that equity, right? That relationship equity when you have a difficult conversation. And so Kim Scott has a whole book called Radical Candor. I'll link to that too. But she talks about radical candor being that sweet spot between caring personally about someone, so much so that you're willing to challenge them directly. So she does kind of this 2x2 matrices, and care personally, challenge directly are the two axes points. When you think about it that way, when you think about why are you having the conversation with this employee, with this coworker, with your boss, with your partner in life, at the end of the day, it's because you care about them. When you start shifting the focus away from you and you start shifting it for the other person, I think it helps have the conversation, because many of you avoid these conversations because you care so personally about somebody that you're unwilling to tell them the truth as you see it. And so thinking about the fact that you're doing this for them, for their benefit, even if it makes you uncomfortable in the moment, is a good place to start. There are some things that you can do, tactical things in the moment, right? When you do have these kinds of conversations, the first, aside from building that rapport, is to understand that because many of us don't run headlong into conversations like this, we think about it, we think about it, we think about it. We talk about it with other people. We practice it, in the shower, when we're driving. The one initiating the conversation often has had time to really process what's going on, why it might be going on, and how they feel about it. But when you ask the other individual to join you in that conversation, this might be hitting them out of left field. They have not had any of that lead time that you have had. And so they're going to be processing what you're saying and their emotional response to it in the moment. So you have to understand that one of the best things you can do when you start those conversations is to keep your own emotions in check, which is why it's good to not rush headlong into these if you're really charged up about something. Let it sit for a bit so you can keep your emotions in check at the start. but also give time and space for the other individual to hear what you're saying and then react internally to it before they can formulate a response. I mean, sometimes we're just so uncomfortable in the moment that we rush the conversation and we don't give that person proper time to be an active listener and a good participant in return. So that's the first thing. Take a breath, set the tone for the conversation, and allow time and space for processing in the moment. The second piece of advice I would give you is use as many questions as possible, especially in the very beginning, because you're going to go in with a perception, a set of facts as you know them, and inevitably there is always more to the story, things you don't know. And so if you go in with general curiosity and you start out by saying, this is what I've overheard, this is what I've seen, I'm concerned about this, were you aware of this? What else am I missing? What's your perspective on this? Those kinds of questions invite the other person to be a part of the conversation. And they can also give you the rest of the story. And then together you can sort of find your way through it. But if you go into that thinking you're the smartest person in the room, that you know all the information, that's exactly how that conversation is going to come across. And you're going to be met with defensiveness, resistance, anger, okay? Anything that could fall in the fight or flight category is not going to be good. So, right, set that tone nice and calm, allow space and time for processing, and ask a lot of questions in the very beginning to make sure the two of you can get on the same page. And then you can move through, what your expectations are going forward, or if the next time something like this happens, what would be a better way to handle it. Sometimes people feel like they did the right thing. They're actually shocked that it was received or perceived in a very negative light. And so, letting them know, even though you thought it was fine, in the future I would prefer this, is actually very, very helpful. And that's when I go back to that Kim Scott analogy, right? That you care so personally about them that you're willing to challenge directly so that this kind of thing doesn't continue to happen and then affect the entire relationship. So these are challenging things, but like I said, very skill-based. I'm going to give you a step-by-step because I train on this and we only have 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to give you kind of a one-sheet step-by-step on how to really structure a conversation like this, along with some of the questions you might ask in the very beginning. And then I'm also going to give you kind of a side note there if the issue that you're dealing with is behavior-related versus performance-related. Those two things look a little bit differently in the conversation. So I'll put some additional questions there on the behavior side just to help gain awareness and hopefully responsibility on the part of the other individual. Now, like I said, the goal here is that as a leader, when you have conversations like this with your team, not only is it the right thing to do because of your role, because you care about them, you want them to develop, you want them to improve, but you're also modeling for them how to have these kinds of conversations so that they will have them with each other. And that's the other piece and the part that I want to close with on this, is that as an employee then comes back to you and wants to tell you about a situation they're having with a coworker, rather than you jumping in and trying to solve that on their behalf, your question back to them is, and have you talked to them about this yet? Right? And then you can even do some coaching one-on-one with that employee so that they can go have that conversation with the coworker. And only after they've tried it would you then get involved, right? If they tried it, it didn't go well, or they had the conversation, things aren't improving, then maybe you get involved, but you have both employees in that conversation and you're just simply there as a facilitator. You're not taking that issue upon yourself to speak on behalf of somebody else, because then that creates a really negative loop and one that you're going to want to run from as quickly as possible. So this having difficult conversations, I think it's really key for employee culture, employee engagement. It's absolutely an expectation of you if you're a leader. Everyone can learn how to do it, even if it makes you a bit uncomfortable. And I'll give you a bunch of resources to help with this. As I said, we do train on this a lot. We're going to do a training this fall, and this is going to be one of the key aspects of the training. So if this is an area you think you need more practice with, keep your eyes peeled on your email, and we'll make sure you get the notifications when we've got a date and time for that, but it'll be this fall. And otherwise, right, you're kind of laying that groundwork so that your employees will start doing this with each other, and the entire culture is one that's built around healthy conflict. Because conflict isn't bad. It's just when we don't handle it well that it becomes really destructive. But healthy conflict is what moves teams forward. And so with that, I will leave you. Be sure to check out the resources down below just to help you out here. And I'll see you back in July.